A pleasant day to one and all. I am Keerthi here, convener of SF Curriculum Committee, IASFS. I welcome you all to this session of panel discussion. Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies was established on Asimov's birthday on Jan 2nd, 1998. The objectives of the association are to provide materials and guidance to the students who pursue their research for their master's and doctoral degrees in the field of science fiction, and to provide a platform for SF enthusiasts to share their views in the form of presenting papers during the annual conferences. IASFS has organized 14 national and 4 international science fiction conferences at different locations in India. The motto is to bring together hundreds of academicians, scholars, scientists, writers, publishers, critics, movie makers, journalists, fans, webmasters, industrialists, technologists, farmers, and the readers to get exposed and exchange the knowledge in the multidisciplinary areas. IASFS proposed to have a degree course and even an online course, and proposed to involve students irrespective of country, state, language, race, and gender. And here is a draft of UGSF course. Let's have a look. Here are the missions. The first one is to develop an optimistic view of life from knowledge gained through the fusion of science and fiction. Second one is to find answers to all the what ifs that wonder us. Third one, to be prepared to explore the new future through the innovative thoughts and ideas. Now let's see what are the PEOs of UGSF studies. The program educational objectives are the statement of areas or fields where the graduates find employment. The preparedness of graduates to take up higher studies. Program educational objectives. The first one, acquire a level of subject knowledge to perform research both in life and career. Make use of and acquire skills to grab the lot of opportunities as SF writers, resolution specialists, and etc. Apply their imaginative skills and innovative ideas to become a scientist. Identify positions such as predictors in army and even choose platforms like filmmakers, bloggers, and reviewers. Develop their imaginative and creative level to a writer which aspires young readers to become scientists. What are the program specific outcomes? After the successful completion of UGSF studies, the students are expected to understand the various genres and subgenres of science fiction, identify the features of each period and regional languages in the given text, acquire a sound knowledge of science fiction through regional science fiction, know the important movements, forms, theories, and select new areas of research. Demonstrate translation skills by translating regional science fiction works. What are program outcomes? Program outcomes are narrow statements that describe what the students are expected to know and would be able to do upon their graduation. On successful completion of UGSF studies, students maximize their knowledge on science fiction and build creative skills through different genres of science fiction. Develop social responsibilities as SF foretellers, that is, of future happenings. Apply theories taught on different situations and practice to bring up new things. Identify research prospects and areas. Create a better outlook of life accepting and life-changing challenges from learning experiences. The UGSF studies works on semester basis and there are total 8 semesters. The first 4 semesters deals with fiction part and the rest 4 semesters deals with the fact study and practical part. Here in the semester 1, the students are able to understand the basics and the genre of science fiction through learning the elements, movements, science fiction as mainstream themes, and the students will be having one elective paper in the first semester. And all these papers are theory based. Here in this semester 2, the students will be learning the origin of science fiction, the various regional science fiction, and the students will study the fiction to reality, the things that have become reality now, the fiction which has changed into the reality now, and visual media, the film studies. Here in this film studies, the students are expected to do a mini project where they get 2 credit points, and all these are theory related one. Here in the third semester, the students will be learning Western science fiction poetry, regional science fiction, and there will be a lective paper. And here the students will also study what is SF criticism. Here the first 4 semesters are over, and in the fifth semester the students are expected to choose a field of their interest, and here they for their project purpose, here they will be having a paper called objective hypothesis select study. The main focus is the reasons. There will be a part of their theory related thing, and in the literary review part, the students are expected to publish a paper on literary review of their field. This will be a plus point for grabbing their job opportunities, because that shows how their students are in their field. The sixth, seventh, and eighth semester are a very difficult one, because the students study the science part, the every science behind their project, every small details, the laws, functioning parts, everything in their field of interest, and the students will be having a lab class. Here in the seventh semester, the students will be dealing with the fact study, lab classes, and there will be a industrial visit, where the students, after having industrial visit, after having some knowledge on the factories and industries part, dealing with the technologies and everything, they are expected to publish a paper in the journals. In the eighth semester, the students will be having models, methodologies, portfolio development. The students are asked to show or expose their projects, where they will be awarded 5 credits points for each, accordingly to their project and their improvement. Now let's see semester-wise course objectives and expected outcomes. The first, the first semester course objectives are equip the students with a basic knowledge about the genre of science fiction studies, fulfill the growing demand for good SF graduates. What are the outcomes? Know the origin and history of science fiction, have the knowledge of science fiction that has come to reality, that to present day world, and analyze the cultural science fiction through regional science fiction. Apply the ritual effects on prescribed texts. Now let's see the course objectives of second semester. Help the student understand the reality and fiction. Acquire the knowledge of ritual science fiction through media studies. Understand expected outcomes are, and for every semester the student should understand, remember, analyze, apply, and evaluate. The first one is to understand the genre of science fiction. Remember the prominent works of classical writers. Analyze and know the difference of SF from other mainstream fictions. Apply the themes on various texts. Evaluate the technical elements and movements in the prescribed texts. The objectives of third semesters are to understand the language and techniques of regional science fiction, gain the knowledge about Western science fiction. The expected outcomes: understand Western science fiction, remember the language and techniques of regional science fiction, analyze and interpret the techniques on other prescribed texts, analyze and create their own poetry, evaluate their own poetry. The objectives of fourth semester are to understand the writers and the works of different periods and from various parts of the world, and develop interest in various science fiction genres produced from diverse regions and its richness. The expected outcomes are to understand the writers and works of different periods through Indian point of view, remember the writers and works of the period, analyze any piece of work keeping in mind the age and its future. In the fifth semester, the course objectives outline the subject and main focuses of the select study. What are the expected? The expected outcomes are choose a specific field, analyze, synthesize, evaluate, find a solution, publish a paper. In the sixth semester, the course objective is to understand the evolution and the history behind the study. The expected outcomes are to understand the shift in thought and techniques in the select study and to create new things. The course objectives are to defend a chosen analysis with evidence, and the students are expected to analyze from different perspectives, evaluate, and publish a paper. In the eighth semester, the students are expected to show up with a model and with a portfolio development. And the students are expected to set him as a model because he have a struggle all through the 4 years to know what is science fiction and understanding the genre and subgenres of science fiction through various science fiction poetries, through various writers and the hard work you have done. And that is end of SF UG curriculum. I am much privileged and feeling honored to introduce the panel members of SF Curriculum Committee. Dr. Narahari is the Secretary General of Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies, Bengaluru. He is the Vice President of Asian Science Fiction Association. He had organized 14 national for World Science Fiction conferences. He is a writer, critic, reports for the #1 SF magazine of the world, namely Locus. Conducting SF writing short story workshop to the children of age group between 13 and 15. He is acknowledged as a pioneer attempt. He has also conducted similar workshop for scientists, SF writers, permanent writers, research scholars, PG and UG students, and senior citizens. After serving for 40 years in the government of Karnataka, he retired as a principal, and now he is working as a principal of Animaster Design and Animation College, Mysore. I welcome you, sir. Dr. Purushothaman has a wonderful teaching experience of nearly 35 years and have produced 80 MPhils, 12 PhDs, and yet to produce 2 PhD degrees, and he had served as a principal for more than 3 esteemed institutions and was a founder and the president of IASFS and conducted 16 national level conferences and was the editor for Indian Journal of Science Fiction Studies and General Secretary for Indian Association for American Studies for 4 times and National President for Indian Association for American Studies 2 times. I welcome you, sir. Dr. Paneerselvam is a retired principal of Government Arts College, Nandanam, Chennai. He had a teaching experience of about 35 years and he had done his MPhil and PhD in American hard science fiction in the year 1886 and 1999. At present, he is an advocate of Bar Council of Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. He had supervised 4 MPhil and 2 PhD candidates. He had served in different fields and different positions in academics, and that was much appreciable. I heartily welcome you, sir. Dr. Anjali Nayak is an associate professor in the Department of Botany in Saraswati Bhuvan College, Aurangabad, having teaching experience of about 25 years, and she is also a recognized research guide. She had published nearly 18 research papers in national and international journals. Her special interests are translating scientific articles for non-science background houses. I welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Balajanand is an associate professor in the Department of English, Geography College, Aurangabad. He had cleared both set and night. He had worked in several colleges and universities. He had completed his doctoral program on science fiction by women writers under the guidance of world-class critic named Harikar Kulkarni, sharing insight with scientific writers and critics. He had edited 2 books and further working on the new projects like a student handbook of science fiction criticism and theory, and masterpiece of science fiction in India. I heartily welcome you, sir. Indrani Das Gupta is presently working as an assistant professor in Maharaja Agharsen College, Delhi, pursuing her PhD in the Department of English on exploring the idea of modern through SF texts spanning from 20th century in Bengal to our contemporary present. I welcome you, ma'am. Dr. Pramila Swami is working as associate professor in the Department of Humanities, Ramaya Institute of Technology, Bengaluru for past 12 years. She has actively taken part in curriculum development in her college and also been a part of Board of Studies and Board of Examiners in various colleges across Bengaluru. I welcome you, ma'am. Dr.Sangeetha is an assistant professor in the Department of English, Sri Sharada College for Women, Salem, Tamil Nadu. Her special interests are science fiction studies, environmental studies, children's psychology, and mythology. She also published 20 research articles, and she also worked as a newsreader for 4 years in a local channel called Polymer. And she also been invited as a chief guest for several occasions. I welcome you, ma'am, and I now ask Sangeetha ma'am to summarize the views of other panel members on SF curriculum. Thank you, ma'am. I thank you all.
Asakazimo about 50 years back was telling that the hard copies of science fiction books are better than the visual science fiction because visual science fiction presents special effects and they may not be science fiction. Science fiction is the literature of change. Hence, we come to know in 50 years we have modified everything and the technology has taken over. We have got perfect semblance of literature, that is science fiction in print as well as in visual media. So, in science fiction curriculum that we propose to frame for undergraduate students of 4 years. The first 2 years they may take up the foundation course and it will be common for all the branches in science fiction itself. During the next 2 years they may have various tracks and they may apt for the filmmaking also. It's a vast field. Hence, it requires imagination, and science fiction is nothing but thought experiment, get and can experiment, and later on, with the help of the films, they can learn them as text and go a long way because one need not have a vast area like Ramoji City or Bollywood City, Hollywood, or even in Singapore. What you see, many of these are meant for filmmaking. outdoor is not advisable nowadays in COVID-19 period. Hence, this gives a lot of scope for the talented students for their vocational arena. Here, I present some of the models of the science fiction movies, Bollywood, Hollywood, and also local in vernacular languages. So how we work and what we aim at. That's required, I believe. And let's pass on to the certain films that we have already seen and will be beaming now for only reference. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the panel discussion on curriculum for starting a course on science fiction studies at Indian universities. Ever since the founding of the Indian Association for Science Fiction Studies, we have been striving to bring science fiction into the curriculum of various courses. Even though we were all academically oriented and part of the curriculum development, we could not do much about all this because there was very little awareness about science fiction and its significance and potential influence. That is why it has taken us almost 22 years to come to the stage where we are talking about how we can plan to introduce an undergraduate or a postgraduate course, especially in science fiction studies. For instance, in my more than 40 years of teaching, I have been part of the Board of Studies, various academic organizations and bodies, and with all my interest and commitment and efforts, we were able to only introduce a few texts which are very important for science fiction, which were classics, appreciated all over the world, and yet even these popular novels and stories were not known to most of the faculty. Therefore, there was initially a lot of hesitation in introducing even the texts in a couple of papers in 1 or 2 semesters. So that is the situation, the ground reality. Now that we are planning on this very important conference, which is a landmark in the history of science fiction in India, we find that we have arrived at a particular status, at a particular point where many people, both teachers as well as writers and academic administrators, have become aware that science fiction is not just a popular study, but something more significant. What I have always insisted upon at the various annual conferences which I and IASFS had organized for the last 20 years or so, I always insisted that science fiction is not merely for the teens, just a popular medium of entertainment, but something more serious. I used to mention, for example, that along with IQ, EQ, and other such quotients, science fiction can develop what I would like to call as the AQ, or what we call the anticipatory quotient. By this I mean that the younger generation should be able to anticipate what is going to come in the future, not by accident, but through certain actions of our own society, our own people, particularly tempered by science and technology. Since we always mention that science fiction is a study of the impact of science upon the world around us, we understand that it can be a very influential study which can ameliorate the various ills and evils that may crop up in the future. Many of the people who are a little bit aware of science fiction know very well that there is a possibility that what we experience today, what we commit ourselves to do today, may lead to various consequences in the future. Without understanding these outcomes, these fallouts, we will be in a very helpless position when the future arrives. Let me illustrate this with a novel, for example, 200 years ago, that was written by Mary Shelley and is called as the first modern science fiction novel. I refer to Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. There, Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, creates a being which we call today as the Frankenstein monster. But once he had built it, given it life, he gets jittery and abandons it without understanding the impact, the consequences of how this creature is going to affect not only himself, his family, and the rest of the world. So a great scientist who was able to give life, what is to be called as aping the creation, right? He is not able to anticipate what will be the result of this particular invention or creation. Same thing, we also talk about the Manhattan Project or the atomic bomb. Of course, there was more awareness, more critical reviews, but still, out of certain circumstances and compulsions, the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which became one of the greatest tragedies in human history. Not merely a tragedy that killed millions of people, but a tragedy that keeps stalking us even today. So like this, I can mention a number of events. So therefore, what we need is a preparation, a kind of a training, a learning process that will help our younger generation, our youth, to be prepared to face the future without what Alvin Toffler called future shock. So therefore, it's a very good thing that we can anticipate what will be the effect of a UG course or a PG course on science fiction in a university. So this particular desire or vision is what is driving us today in this panel discussion. Of course, we discussed on various occasions how an undergraduate course or any kind of course cannot be implemented just like that, but we have to anticipate what will be the impact of that course and how the students and their parents are going to take to it. Because one of the basic demands, requirements for a course of study is how it is utilitarian, useful for the students. That means, simply put, employability. We all know that today, in India particularly, it is characterized that our graduates, particularly our engineering graduates, are unemployable. It's an unfortunate statement, of course. With my own experience of conducting courses, introducing material for employment generating skills, what we find is that this question of employability is one of the prime things about a course of study. There was a lot of demand for engineering seats about 20 years ago. So colleges mushroomed like nobody's business. So, but today what is happening? In Tamil Nadu itself, we will find that more than about 1 lakh and odd seats are vacant because there are no takers. Many of these new colleges are shut down. Why? Is it because the courses are bad? No, it is not the course that is bad, but the employability of the people who come out with their engineering degrees. So in order to find a solution to this kind of an issue, we don't want to have a course that blindly talks about very philosophically or scientifically about various science fiction stories, novels, ideas, etc., but something that can build a curriculum that instills some of the most required skills for the future. It is our duty to identify these various skills, one of which I had already mentioned as the AQ. People must be trained. The young mind should be prepared to anticipate what is the outcome of everything that happens to us. I remember, for example, one particular story, I don't remember the details right now, where I think it's called a T-Rex, if I remember. It talks about how a time traveler going into the Jurassic Age steps on a lizard, and when he comes back to the present, there is a different world altogether, and it is the dinosaurs who are ruling the world. So this kind of a thing is what we must be prepared. If you make one wrong move, maybe the world might become another planet of the apes, perhaps, or maybe still worse. We don't know. Or at the worst scenario, there may be the end of humanity as it is today. So what I would like to suggest today is that let us aim for a course that instills not merely a study of various novels and stories from the science fiction genre, but also develop certain skills relevant to the future in the light of the various ideas, concepts, imagination that the science fiction writers have brought to us. Let us hope that there will be a successful completion or a successful realization of this particular course on science fiction. Like we said in the brochure of this particular conference, that all roads lead to science fiction, let us also say that in the future, not very far, but in the near future, let all roads lead to a course in science fiction. I wish all the best for all the participants and also request them to seriously consider the possibilities of potentials of science fiction studies as a means of building the future without particular defects or particular hassles. I once again thank the organizers, the University of Bangalore, and the fellow participants for this particular opportunity. Thank you, one and all.
Thanks for the opportunity. I would like to start my views on an exclusive curriculum on SF by saying that in the Indian context, it may not fetch much for the students from the point of view of job requirements. I have served the government in the capacity of Chairman of Placement Cell and Nodal Officer for Public-Private Partnership for government and government-aided institutions in the state of Tamil Nadu. I am of the view that we are required to produce grist for someone else's mill. Having said that, any endeavor to formulate a curriculum must have the job market always in view. A curriculum on science fiction can be arrived at with the helpful assistance of certain institutions, personalities, and libraries. An institute that has thrown open its doors for this purpose is James Gunn Institute of English, Center for Science Fiction, University of Kansas at Lawrence, United States of America. This speaker has first-hand knowledge of the workings of this institute and what it can offer, as he was an invitee to the summer program of this institute in the year 2000. The Center for Science Fiction has in its website an exhaustive list of books for any library on SF. This list, as of now, was updated in the year 2016. Also, the website invites correspondence with the director of the center, Mac Kitterick, who is a science fiction author himself, and also its associate director, Keith Johnson, who is also an SF writer. The website, in unmistakable words, gives a list of must-have books for an SF library, print and online. Next in importance is the University of Liverpool. Liverpool is not only known for having produced the Beatles singers. This is also the seat of Science Fiction Foundation of United Kingdom. The Library of Science Fiction Foundation of UK is located in the University of Liverpool. For a pretty long time, an SF scholar and a librarian, Andy Sawyer, served as its curator, who retired a couple of years back. Andy Sawyer is also an acquaintance of IASFS, as he is well known to our General Secretary, Sri Narahari, and of course myself. Again, this speaker has first-hand knowledge of this library at Liverpool, since the speaker visited this library in the year 2002 for his independent research. Yet another help lies in celebrated books on science fiction. Anatomy of Wonder, a guide to science fiction by Neil Barron. Three Tomorrows by Sam Moskowitz, and books by Darko Subin are notable works for consultation. It may be worth mentioning here in this context that a couple of years back, Neil Barron ran an online course in science fiction teaching, and it drew several thousand aspirants. Now, getting down to the nitty-gritty of SF curriculum. An undergraduate course must have a history of science fiction, a panoramic view in English and in other languages, preferably. A book on SF history would be worth a keen look, and there are, to my knowledge, 2 science fiction history books. There is to add an encyclopedia of SF, first published in 1979. In In 2011, we learned that its authors, John Clute and Peter Nichols, published a third edition of the same. A welcome feature of this monumental work is that it is available for free online. Last but not least is James Gunn's book, The Road to Science Fiction. I'd like to mention in passing that a chapter of the James Gunn Center is functioning under the stewardship of Dr. Lata Nair at the Mother Teresa College of Arts and Science in Kochi in Kerala. To conclude, I'd like to recall what Professor James Gunn exhorted me to do, which has now been fulfilled by our General Secretary, Dr. Sri Narahari, that I return to India and work for the promotion of SF in India. Beginning a course in science fiction is a commendable initiative, and I offer my services for it wholeheartedly. Thank you all.
Hello everyone, I'm Indrani Dasgupta, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Maharaja Agrisena College, University of Delhi. Today I'm here to discuss science fiction curriculum. Is it really required? Is it necessary? I'm grateful to Indian Science Fiction Association and primarily to Professor Sri Narahari who gave me a chance to be a part of this esteemed panel discussion. And yes, we do require science fiction in academia. It's time that we discuss, it's time that we deliberate and navigate this rich field in which we learn so much about our life, our society, and about ourselves, as to who we are and what we can do with our life, how we can make it better. Science fiction, as so many of us have termed as a thought experiment, allows us to, understand the beauty that life offers to us and which somehow, because of the politics and all the problems that we face in our life, we somehow seem to miss. So it's time that in academia that we really think hard as to what makes this, science fiction a wonderful field and in which the students and scholars from different disciplines, they all need to engage with it. I'm here to speak about primarily as science fiction is being studied in Delhi University colleges. So basically, if we look at these two, papers that we have been discussing and which is now a part of our Delhi University syllabuses, the first paper, the second year paper, this traces actually, locates science fiction within the mass printing culture from 19th century onwards and, includes the rise of the genres, basically rise of the genres, and it introduces the students to the idea of popular literature and stresses its importance vis-a-vis modern literature. The idea of popular literature, which became, a part of a modern imaginary, a modern consciousness, is what is studied in this paper. This also familiarizes the students with the debate between high and low, as we all know that science fiction has often been termed as low literature, as vulgar literature, often as, escapist literature. So they are trying to, make the students aware of these, markers, these monikers, and, the tension that involves as to what is studied under canonical literature and under non-canonical literature. The student also engages with issues concerning print culture, the bestsellers, and popular literature as such. So this course basically aims to trace the rise of print culture in England and the emergence of genre fiction, and because of which stories have been included here. You will notice that no novels have been, but primarily stories, and of course, the essays. Darkest Events, which is the most important. Then in speculative, when we are reading speculative fiction, which is the third year paper, but an optional paper, here, basically we are trying to raise questions about the intervention of science and technology in human life. It's basically how we understand the relationship between science and technology, and also make us aware of certain subgenres of science fiction like solar punk, cyberpunk, and so on, and steampunk. Amongst these speculative function, as we know, fiction is significant for its exploration of what it means to be human, even as it questions and shapes possible futures that may take place and the fate of humanity in general. So basically the prime question is what it means to be human in a world which has been changed beyond our own visible understanding by technology. So science, technology, human, and what will be the future now with all these interfaces. So this is what this paper is all about. The way forward, how I look forward, is if we are to introduce and critically think about science fiction within academia, is to introduce more text from the Indian science fiction imaginary that will allow us to engage with more social and political issues, because science fiction in general is not fantastic but is a part of our social imaginary. It just deliberates upon a social vision of life. So maybe it's important that we deal with it from an Indian science fiction imaginary and move beyond the category of an optional paper. That is very much required. If we are to understand and deliberate upon science fiction, we cannot relegate it to an optional status, but make it a part of a main paper. And then also make the students aware with examples drawn from various categories of science fiction: steampunk, solar punk, weird fiction, cli-fi, cyberpunk, hard fiction, and so on. That will allow even our the readers, the students, to engage with these various categorizations. And also newer authors will be found, they will be researched upon, and that will lead to few further avenues of research. Of course, I also believe that not only Indian science fiction but a world science fiction also needs to be taught, and that can be done by introducing it as part of one unit, so that the student become aware of different practices of global imaginary, different methodologies, different themes that crop up, and that will allow us a new global consciousness to arise. So science fiction curriculum is required, yes. What do we need to do forward? We need to really think forward, think deliberate, and literally debate upon what are the issues that are visiting us as as part of our global world. And then maybe think about discussing which are the most important texts that ought to be studied. We can borrow from the syllabus that has already been out there. Since many years Isaac Asimov was taught, then of course it was deleted from the syllabuses, and now two papers have been introduced. One is of course an optional paper in Delhi universities, but still I believe it's a start and we should carry it forward. So this is what I want to say about science fiction curriculum. Thank you everyone.
Good afternoon, one and all present here. I am Professor Dr. Pramila Swami from the Department of Humanities, MS Ramaya Institute of Technology, Bangalore. I am privileged to be part of this forum that is discussing on the relevance of science fiction in curriculum development. So today my focus is introducing science fiction into the engineering curriculum. So the target audience that I am going to talk about is engineering institutions, the engineering graduates for whom such a platform is required. So these days we are looking for alternative ways of teaching, a classroom which becomes a discourse where the teacher is a facilitator and the student becomes a learner. So the interaction between the teacher and the learner is very important. Now when we look at the introduction of science fiction in engineering curriculum, we must also think about the vision and mission, the program objectives, or say the program specific objectives that is being designed, and accordingly the courses are being mapped out. Now, when we look at the humanities and social sciences, their vision and mission usually involve certain terminologies like critical thinking, awareness, social responsibilities, human values, ethical consciousness, behavior, and so on. So, more or less, they are the courses that are offered from the humanities disciplines should focus on these aspects, these terminologies, which the courses would prove beneficial for. Now, when you look at these departments, the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences offers subjects like language skills, communication competencies, professional communication, functional English, and so on. But how much do they cater to these needs of the students, or from the perspective of the vision and mission which is being designed for the department? Now, introduction of science fiction in the curriculum would definitely bridge a gap between what is being talked about in terms of the vision and mission of the department in inculcating these ethical consciousness, behavior, human responsibilities, human values, critical reasoning or critical thinking. These terminologies that a department talks about, or we can say boast about, are these departments really offering such courses? Now that is the point of discussion. Now I feel there is a lacuna in what these the terminology says, and then the courses are being offered. These courses are offered in such a way that students, they tend to take up these subjects, understand them, pass in the exam, and so on. So there is nothing much of inner learning that happens, or we can say value education, that we today talk about. Now, introducing this science fiction in the curriculum, where the science fiction is used as a text, as a classroom discourse, as a text for discussion in terms of debates. It could be in terms of group discussions, panel discussions after reading the science fiction. For example, let me talk about Amitabh Ghosh, The Calcutta Chromosome. So this particular novel by Ghosh provokes students into thinking about ethical issues. It relates to technology and science as well. It involves biomedical developments, it also talks about medical consciousness or medical ethics. So definitely students from biotechnology or chemical engineering students would benefit this particular understanding of the text. They would somehow try to relate what they are learning in terms of technical subjects, and this particular science fiction, they can see how they are interconnected. So when science fiction is introduced as a curriculum from the Department of Humanities in the engineering institutions, it more or less gives scope for interdisciplinary courses to be offered. So nowadays we talk about transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach of study. So where the subjects are and should not be taught as watertight compartments. Rather, one is interconnected with another, one is infused with one another. So science fiction in the classroom acts not just a kind of a literature genre which is genre under literature talking about science and fiction. No, it is something more beyond it. Engineering students can relate to what they are learning in terms of technology and science, and also the fictionalized components that they see or trace when they read a science fiction. So using science fiction as a classroom discourse, or watching a science fiction movie as a form of understanding and discourse analysis would prove beneficial for engineering students. Some of the benefits that one may understand is it may inculcate, I have listed out, critical thinking and reasoning, responsibility towards self and society, decision making, creative thinking and reasoning, critical thinking and reasoning, creative writing, awareness and consciousness, and also a promotion of self-awareness and inculcating human values. So this kind of value based education system is what the present, or say the new education system, is also talking about, that we have to, our education system should inculcate a kind of awareness, kind of responsibility towards self and society. And for engineering graduates, this is very, very important, where they should not learn something from only from a technical point of view, but also something where they are more responsible towards the society and self. To complement this particular thought, science fiction and its introduction in engineering mainstream courses will definitely prove beneficial and will be an value-based education. So from this line of thought, I would like to end by saying that curriculum can be enhanced by introducing science fiction for engineering students. Thank you.
Honorable dignitaries, respected teachers, and my dear friends. My name is Dr. Balajanand, Professor and Head, Department of English Language and Literature, Devgiri College, Aurangabad, Maharashtra State. I am here to have a very precise presentation on science fiction curriculum, which has become a dire need of the time. When we discuss the issue of science fiction curriculum, the very aim and objective should be very clear, which has been defined by Marathi Vigyan Parishad Mumbai, that is inculcation of scientific perspective and critical insights. The Indian scholars have presented a very wonderful approach. How can we acquire language? How the students should possess a command on language, that is through literature. Language through literature formula has been accepted by Indian scholars, and which is very, very pragmatic. Likewise, how can one inculcate scientific perspective? The approach is suggested science through science fiction. So even a lay student can easily understand the complexities of science through science fiction. So the very intention of the syllabus should be very, very clear. Aim and objective are as essential as the nomenclature of the syllabus, because this field is new. Few universities has used the title such as literature and science. Few has used science fiction literature or science literature. So the correct nomenclature, science fiction, is given by various scholars. When we discuss the issue of curriculum at graduation level, first year level, one cannot neglect the subject such as compulsory English. In the age of interpellation, where one has to make choices in a choiceless condition, at our hand we have a very best anthology, that is It Happened Tomorrow, edited by Balajanand. With a critical analysis, though the book has two lacunas. The first one is that there is no introduction of the writers. Second one is there are no any end notes, question and answer as obligatory to compulsory English students. So with the kind permission of the editor, Dr. Balajanand, an eminent scientist and science fiction writer, a living writer, and the notable publication, National Book Trust, we can take initiative and write request letter to the concerned authorities. And in this way, we can implement this book for compulsory English. For the students of science stream, this is the best book. Easily they can understand the concept of science, what is invention, what is experiment, what is thought experiments. Along with this book, some science fiction poems can be prescribed. For second year, the person who is known as an individual who is known as the lengthened shadow of an institute, in the words of Emerson, means the dedication and devotion to Marathi Vigyan Parishad, the dedication of A.P. Deshpande is worth considerable, and his anthology of selected science fiction stories from various Indian languages can be implemented. That will be a very, very good choice. Furthermore, for the third year, means in Maharashtra, there is one worth considerable university, that is Shivaji University, Kolhapur, where they have prescribed the paper of compulsory English for third year. And Road to Science Fiction, edited by Professor James Gunn, is the worth considerable choice. Besides that, theoretical books by the same author can be used as the new encyclopedia of science fiction, where the concept of theory and practical will be very, very clear, and the students of science will understand that practical is more important than theory. While prescribing the syllabus of science fiction as an optional subject, that is English literature, one cannot neglect the notable eminent editor, that is Frank Ian McGill, and his two books, Survey of Science Fiction Literature and Science Fiction, Alien Encounter. Both these books will give few clues while prescribing the syllabus. So for the first year, we can prescribe Frankenstein, the very seminal text of science fiction, along with the history and schools of science fiction, which has been explained by a very student-friendly editor and writer, none other than Adlis. So his two books are very, very useful. Furthermore, we can also go to Indian scenario and history and schools of science fiction, means the contribution given by the well-known scholars like Manoj Pataria, Dr. Arvind Mishra, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan Upadhyay, Professor S.M. Gupta, and the anthology or the book Science Fiction in India, Past, Present and Future will be a worth considerable voices. Moreover, the voices or the literature, science fiction literature presented by Dr. Devendra Mewari and Jayant Naralikar is equally worth considerable. We can also have a synthesis of foreign and Indian literature in the field of science fiction, and Octavia Butler is a best choice. At least her three novels, Dawn, Adulthood Rides, Imago, and her short science fiction stories will be useful as a better choice. Furthermore, we have the contribution of science fiction by women, who are the notable women all over India in almost all the states right from Bengal to Maharashtra and Maharashtra to Gujarat. We have to take a deep survey. What is the contribution of the women in Kannada and other states? That will be a very best choice. Furthermore, we have certain organizations, institutes such as Indian Association of Science Fiction Studies, Marathi Vignan Parishad, Bengali Indian Association, and so on and so forth. Exploration of such organization will be very, very useful. Part of the masterpieces in the field of science fiction poetry. Good reference books such as Feminism, Ecofeminism, and Science Fiction, Vices of the Voiceless, recently published by Dr. Balajanand will be a good choice. What are the masterpieces of drama which should be prescribed under English literature? One field is very, very vital. A.P. Deshpande sir has published one book, Not Out 50, Half Century of Marathi Vignan Parishad, and at the conclusion of the book, he has included certain cartoons related or associated with science fiction. That will be a kind of best choice. In this way, the syllabus of science fiction will be very, very fruitful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody. I'm thankful for the organizers to give me this opportunity to speak on the science fiction curriculum evaluation part of it. Though it is in the very preliminary stages of preparation, it can be improvised when we get the suggestions from all the members. So I begin my presentation. That IASFS is planning to launch a degree course in science fiction studies. It's a great beginning in the field of science fiction, I feel. It will help in creation of scientific fiction literature and other forms of infotainment like science fiction films, scientific journalism, etc. This is going to be an interdisciplinary course, and it is open to students of all faculties, but especially the students of science are going to be exposed to the artworks of fiction. uh, and from that point of view, science students who are not much into literature, they will uh, definitely get interested in this field if such type of courses are launched. This will present an opportunity for these students to explore the literary world, and the application of the knowledge that they have gained will be certainly utilized in this course. I was provided with the preliminary outline of the proposed science fiction curriculum, and based on it I am proposing the tentative evaluation scheme of the same. Referring to the tables displayed here, this course, as we can see, it spans over 4 years and 8 semesters. Uh, since we have not yet decided whether it is going to be a choice based credit system type of course or conventional courses that we used to have, uh, in the beginning, for just as a beginning, I have launched this pattern of evaluation that across all these 8 semesters, the first 4 semesters, that is first year and second year of the course, will comprise of 5 papers each, and I have assigned 30 marks each for each of the papers. So in first 2 years, students will have the opportunity to score 600 marks. Semester 5th and semester 6th, students are supposed to choose papers from the field of their choice. Any assigned paper we are not giving them. And for 5th semesters, there will be only 2 papers. For semester 6, again there will be 5 papers based on the fields that they have chosen. Again, semester 7 will have extension of semester 6, as I was told, and again there will be 5 papers. In the last semester, semester 8, however, students are expected to complete the project work and profile development work, for which we have assigned 100 marks each. So total marks for all the semesters and all the 4 years, it will be 1200 marks. Uh, as I was given the outline, the semester 1 we are going to introduce the students with papers like Introduction to Science Fiction, Language, Elements and Movements of Science Fiction, then Science Fiction and Mainstream and Themes of Science Fiction. In the second semester, we shall be dealing with the history of science fiction, again for 5 papers, that will include origin, regional science fiction, fiction to reality, then fiction gone fiction, science fiction film studies, like that. Third semesters will be divided to the study of literature on science fiction with 5 papers that will include legendary books, criticism, poem and non-fiction, regional science fiction and economical science fiction. In the fourth semester also it will be extension on the same books theme only, literature theme only. Again they will be studying legendary books, criticism, regional scientific fiction, science fiction, then translation studies and science fiction film studies in the fourth semester. Fifth semester there will be only 2 papers as we just now said of based on the field that they have chosen. Sixth semester will be again 5 paper based on the chosen field like law or parts of science fiction, functioning, lab, etc. One thing I forgot to mention that in the all these first 6 semesters, sorry, all the 8 semesters, some papers will be devoted to theory part and some papers will be devoted to practical part. Again, we have not as yet isolated or bifurcated the syllabus into which part will be practical, which part will be theory. But certainly there will be field visits in some of the semesters, there will be practical studies in some of the semesters, and accordingly we shall add that in the evaluation scheme. In the last year, as I said, students are supposed to complete the project work and portfolio development work, and marks will be assigned to that accordingly. I was asked to comment on the examination pattern, question patterns that we are going to have. In my opinion, instead of having subjective type of questions like long answer type questions or short note type questions, we can devote the syllabus to the multiple choice question pattern of the examination, as in my opinion students are required to study in depth. If the objective type questions are given in the examination, they have to choose from the correct given options, they have to choose the correct option, and that type of examination truly tests their knowledge and not just their memory as is the case in the conventional examination pattern. That's what I think. Again, if we want to change to the choice based credit system type of running of the course, then of course we will have to reframe our curriculum, science fiction curriculum, and we will have to identify the areas like core subjects. We have to go for elective subjects, and we also have to go for skill enhancement elective subjects, and accordingly we have to assign credits to each of these subject areas. Not only that, we can also decide how many lectures are required per week for these credits that the students are going to collect over the span of 4 years and 8 semesters. So in very brief and in just a preliminary idea I have proposed regarding the evaluation part of the science fiction, and this is open to discussion, this is open to suggestions from all the esteemed members. We can reorganize, we can reframe the evaluation pattern of the science fiction studies. Thank you very much for the opportunity.